"You seem to have answers for everything," he said to me. He was 100% right and 100% wrong at the same time. This is a podcast about how that can be and how you can engage with better answers. Hey, it's Andrew, and this is Safety on Tap. Since you're listening and you must be a leader wanting to grow yourself and drastically improve health and safety along the way, welcome to you. You're in the right place. If this is your first time listening in, thanks for joining us, and well done for trying something different to improve. And of course, welcome back to all of you wonderful regular listeners. Before you think that this episode will be a gratuitous brag about how good I think I am wrapped up in some kind of parable of a story, stay with me for a few minutes and just decide after that. When he said to me, "You seem to have answers for everything," he was both right and wrong at the same time. He was right because to him, it did seem like I had answers for lots of the things that we were talking about and working through in our coaching together. He was wrong because I wasn't really giving him answers in the way that questions are usually asked or problems are usually solved with solutions. What I was giving him was responses to his question, to his story, to his context. Responses aren't answers. Responses are what we do when it's our turn. In a dialogue, two or more people engage in turn-taking. That's the exchange. Dialogue is an ancient word, very central to modern human experience. It comes from two Greek words put together, dia, which translates to through, and logos translates to meaning. So dialogos, or dialogue, is the movement or the flow of meaning through the people who are involved. You can see turn-taking all the time, which isn't dialogue, and it's a little bit more like tennis. One person serves, another person receives and returns the ball. The object of tennis and the object of a huge proportion of our interactions with other people is to get to the end, to resolve the point. Usually, even if we don't realize it, in favor of one person or the other. I'm not a fan of tennis, but I enjoy watching it with people who love tennis. And one of the most enjoyable parts of watching tennis with tennis fans is that they love it. See what I did? They love it when the game goes on and on and on. They love it when the match involves players taking the lead off each other, because the fun of tennis is not in the winning, but in keeping the game going, often for hours and hours. For them, the essence of the game is not really to win, although that's exciting. It's not really to get an answer to the question of who comes out on top, but to engage in the struggle, the contestation, the spectacle. When he said to me, "You seem to have answers for everything," he was right in saying that I seem to have answers for everything, because most of us, most of the time, appreciate that whilst we think we want the answer to resolve the question, to get a solution to the problem, what we're actually looking for is a greater amount of clarity that we're heading in the right direction and a level of confidence about our ability to go where we want to go. So I was satisfying his need to get greater clarity, to move away from uncertainty and inaction towards certainty and action, clarity and confidence. I gave him what he wanted, even though he thought it was answers. He actually knows that I had very few answers. He was wrong because I wasn't really giving him answers, but engaging in the game, agreeing to dance with him once he set the tune for both of us to get a little clearer and he a little more confident about where he could go with the topic at hand. Hey, it's Andrew with a quick reflection about performance. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, "I wish I had a coach for work." So it's pretty normal that coaching isn't a concept that's on your mind. What I do know is, from working with hundreds of health and safety professionals, what's more likely to be in your mind are the frustrations you might be feeling about making change, or the doubts you have about your ability to step up, or concerns you have about the capability of your team to better service the needs of your organization, Or maybe you're excited but unsure about your new promotion, that expanded responsibility, or how in the heck you'll develop and deliver that new health and safety strategy. These are the everyday things in the game of health and safety practice. Some good, some not so good. A coach is not on the field of play with you. They don't pass you the ball and tell you what to do. A coach helps you be ready for the game, to prepare a plan, to develop the skills or the capabilities for the next challenge, and support you through the losses as well as the wins. Coaching is not evaluated on your participation or the time spent. Coaching is only evaluated on its outcomes for you, and they can be pretty awesome. Coaching is one of the most effective forms of professional development I've ever seen. I have a long list of stories and people who I can put you in touch with to tell you exactly how they've benefited from coaching with me. And it's a pretty smart investment in valuable resources for you and your team. If you want to explore how coaching might help accelerate you and your team's success, visit www.safetyontap.com/curious. There are an infinite number of responses I can choose from. These are not answers, remember. At the risk of giving you examples of responses, which might sound like I am giving you, the listener, answers to the question of how not to give answers but responses, that would be ironic. Some of the responses you might think about could sound like this. Why is that important? What exactly are you talking about? What have you tried or considered trying? But my responses are not all questions, as sometimes people assume that that's what coaching is all about. Other responses could sound like this. You described it this way, and I replay what they said. Is that a fair representation? That's interesting. You seem to be saying or doing this, but not that. So that's kind of a compare or contrast prompt for them. I'm picking up that you've assumed X, Y, or Z. Surfacing assumptions here is the central part of what the fathers of organizational learning, Chris Agris and Don Schoen, they called that double loop learning. I noticed this about what you're saying, and I think it caught my attention because, and you explain, a sense that you are, and you insert an emotion that you've picked up. I am not sure what you're saying. I don't know. These last two are great. They're kind of anti-answers. They literally seem like they're being unhelpful. But some of the most helpful things I've said to anyone I've engaged in dialogue with have been, I don't know what you're saying, or I don't know. And here's a final few. Oh. Huh? You might think I'm trying to be funny now. I'm not. These last few, including the noises that you make, are called continuous or encourages. Brief, non-judgmental words or noises designed to do what they're called. Encourage the person to continue. A lot of health and safety leaders come to me to work with them and their teams because they tried to get answers from something like a training course or hiring a bunch of new people or an internal project or reading a book or coming up with a new strategy. And they're struggling either because the answers aren't clear or what they thought were answers turned out not to be. People come to me seeking the answers that they didn't get when they expected to get answers. And so we begin the work of answering, not only seeking answers. He was kind of right and kind of wrong when he said to me, you seem to have answers for everything. He felt good, not because he got answers, but because he engaged in the co-creative process of answering the very things that he brought into the dialogue to begin with. Answering is not the same as the answer. Answering is a verb. It's a doing word. It happens in the liminal space between here and there. Answers are nouns. They're things, objects, neat, defined, packages of sweet, sweet satisfaction, which are almost always wrong. I understand that the world around you is fast-paced and your time poor and people demand answers. I'm not suggesting that you become a coach nor a philosopher like Plato. I can confidently tell you that the sky will not fall when you respond rather than answer, and that you can still, quickly and pleasantly help other people get the clarity and confidence which is at the heart of their search for answers in just a matter of minutes. I was coming to the end of a scheduled session with Sarah. That's not her real name. We had covered a lot of ground. She had come to find the answer to how do we grow into the best safety team in our industry. I had more responses than answers, as you might expect. Sarah had wrestled with what that means and why it was important to her. We pinned down the emotions that were driving the motivation for her. She had revealed to herself that it was difficult for her team to engage in the goal for a bunch of reasons, including that she had not invited them to. They didn't actually know that that was her goal. In the final few minutes, my process generally in coaching tends towards two things that I think are important. One is about actions and commitments to action. But before that, I ask a simple question. Has this been helpful? I know you are an astute listener, so you'll quickly realize that this is a closed question, and many of you will have been taught that closed questions are bad for learning and dialogue and that open questions are a million times better. I'm not going to argue. That's generally a good rule of thumb. I've asked variations of this question, closed and open, more times than most safety people have had breakfast. Your well-intentioned advice to me to improve my question might be to instead ask something like, how has this session been helpful to you? And you'll see the first problem, that I'd be assuming the session had, in fact, been helpful. Sometimes people say no. I've had plenty of sessions where people have said that it really hasn't been super helpful. They're in the minority, but it's non-zero. And guess what? I don't care what the answer is because the response is worth it. If the session wasn't helpful, it gives us both pause for feedback and intention setting for next time. We recalibrate and we refocus, hopefully in a direction that is more helpful. But almost always the answer to the question is, yes, this has been really helpful. And without missing a beat, almost always in the same breath, they continue to reflect out loud why the session was helpful. My guess is that when people spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour engaged in dialogue in which they are engaged in answering answers, they are not limited by a closed question and don't need permission or a cleverly worded open question to keep doing what we had been doing for the past 55 minutes. Instead of seeking or providing answers or trying to be an answer consumer or an answer vending machine, people like you and I have the opportunity to instead choose how we respond. To respond in ways that are generous, empathic, and helpful, to engage in the dialogue of answering, and to do it with the very people that we're seeking to serve. I'm sure that you will have some barriers and objections to what I've shared. I'd like to hear them. Leave a comment over at safetyontap.com/EP218. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, the link to that is at the top of the description. Or you can drop a comment below if this is posted on a social media platform that you're accessing this podcast. The ball's in your court. Shall you and I continue to play the game? Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, what's the one thing you'll do to take positive, effective, or rewarding action to grow yourself and drastically improve health and safety along the way? See ya.